Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum benedicta tui in mulieribus.
In the last 2 mornings of mercy, I've had the opportunity to talk to one of our fellow disciples, or volunteers if you prefer volunteers, and we got to talking in the first conversation, and that led to the second conversation. And we were talking about a friend of his who was talking to another person, so we'll say the friend of the friend, and these two were talking, and this friend was talking a little bit about what seems to be the futility of sometimes helping our homeless brothers and sisters. And we can probably all relate to it. We can kind of ask that question: does giving that peanut butter and jelly sandwich to that homeless person, how is that helping them in the long term? It gives them a meal right now, but we see them go back to the tent, we see them go back to where they came from, and we know they're going to be just as homeless, and the causes for their homelessness are going to exist just as much, whether that's mental illness or drug addiction or something else. So this friend was talking to his friend and saying how it seems so futile to help them. And the friend came back with an interesting response. He came back and he said, we're not going to solve homelessness, we're not going to solve poverty, we're not going to solve the reasons that cause these items. And he speaks, of course, on strong scriptural grounds. Our Lord reminds us that we will always have the poor with us. We can look in Matthew 26:11 and see that. He goes on to talk a little bit about why he's talking about the poor, because he says, you won't always have the poor, but you won't always have me. But he makes it clear that we will always have poor people around us. The friend, however, goes on to talk about a very interesting point. He says, we'll always have the poor, but this friend says, but we get to participate in the Incarnation. And that's such an amazing thought. If we really stop and think about what that means, you know, we can look in the Gospel of John, where St. John talks about right in the beginning chapter. He says, in the beginning was the Word. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. That is such an astounding thought. When we think about that, we think about God who exists outside of the universe, who created the universe, created everything within it. We can talk a little bit about what we know of science in that, in the Big Bang Theory, not the television show, the actual scientific theory of where everything existed at one point in time and exploded out from there. And interestingly enough, many astronomers initially wanted to reject that theory because exactly it spoke too much to a beginning, to a point of existence, and therefore you have to ask the question, who or what created that? But nonetheless, all existence, I try to think of that as in a balloon or a big bubble, if you will, of the stars and the planets and the black holes and time and space. And God exists outside of that. And yet in the Incarnation, God chooses to become man, to become us, and to live with us. He goes on, St. John talking a little bit about in Jesus, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. He talks about the light shines its darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And when we think about that again in the Incarnation, we can also think about another disciple that we have that has helped us, Monica, who she talked about. Christ is not afraid to go to the darkest places, and as his disciples, neither are we. It is a joy to take part in this great work. So we can continue to talk about the various verses in John chapter 1. We can continue to talk about this idea that God becomes us to be with us. And really that he becomes man, not just to be with the elite, not to be with just the proper and good people, but he goes to be with us and to equate himself with even the least of these, with all of the outcasts. We can see that most clearly when he's speaking in Matthew 25, when he says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. And it's important for us to realize that our Lord didn't say to, for my people were hungry and you gave them drink or food, or my people were thirsty. He absolutely equates us giving food and drink and all those things as giving it to him, indeed participating in the incarnation. Our Lord goes on to equate himself with people that are forgotten in the book of Acts when he's talking with St. Paul, and who is at the time Saul, and when Saul is persecuting the early Christians, and our Lord goes to Paul, or Saul at the time, and says, "Why are you persecuting me?" in Acts chapter 9. And again, it's important for us to remember, Jesus didn't say, "Why are you persecuting people I think strongly of?" or "Why are you persecuting people that I love dearly?" He says, "Why are you persecuting me?" Again, God equates himself with his creation, becomes his creation, indeed, that incarnation. We can continue on with the contemplation here, but I think it suffices to say, when we help the homeless, even if we're not ultimately fixing their problems in the long term, if we are deciding to show that mercy, if we are deciding to give that food or that drink or that clothing, just to be with them, to visit with them, we are indeed participating in the incarnation, in the one who our Lord has said, when we help the least of these, we are helping him, and therefore participating in the incarnation. Another way that we can also think about this is when we think about servant of God Dorothy Day, who we definitely take inspiration from. In June 1946, she wrote "Love is the Measure" in the Catholic Worker newspaper. And in that, she wrote, "We knew a priest once, a most lovable soul, and a perfect fool for Christ. Many of his fellow priests laughed at him and said, 'Why, he lines up even the insane and baptizes them. He has no judgment.' He used to visit this hospital," and Dorothy Day referred to that hospital in St. Louis, "and night and day found him wandering through the wards. And then one old man said to me, 'Whenever I opens my eyes, there is Father. He was forever hovering over his children to dispense the sacraments. It was all he had to give. He couldn't change the rickety old hospital. He couldn't provide them with decent housing. He could not see that they got better jobs. He couldn't even seem to do much about making them give up liquor and women and gambling. But he could love them, and love them all he did. And he gave them everything he had. He gave them Christ.'" We can't change their condition, homeless brothers who are on the streets, other than maybe in very small ways. We probably aren't going to get a lot of them out of tents, certainly not in the short term. We might not be able to solve their mental illness. We might not be able to solve their drug addictions, but we can give them Christ. We can participate in the one who, as our Lord reminded St. Faustina, is the one who descended from heaven to earth and allowed myself to be pierced with a lance. And that's why we keep doing the Mornings of Mercy. That's why we keep hoping and praying to raise the funds for a house of hospitality, so that we can at least bring our brothers and sisters, that we can bring Christ in from out in the cold or the hot, if it's in the middle of summer, and that we can participate in the incarnation. And that, of course, is nothing short of participating in his mercy and in the message of divine mercy. Take care. God bless. If you have listened this far, I'm hoping that you'll listen just a bit more. The funds that we receive to do all the work that we do out on the streets towards building a house of hospitality or raising the funds for that all comes from private sources. We don't accept any public funds and have no intention of doing so in the future. If you'd like to learn more about why that is, you can check out a video that'll be on this channel. In the meantime, while I know there are many good and worthy places that you can do financial donations, do your almsgiving, if you feel called to donate to this one, there are certainly ways that you can do so. You can do a one-time donation through our website, or by contacting us. You can also set up a monthly donation that helps us build that ongoing income to be able to pay our bills in the long term, to make sure that we can continue our work and can continue to grow our work to reach out to our brothers and sisters on the streets, and in so doing proclaim the message of divine mercy. Please take a look at information either on the website or through links on the description so that you can learn more and how you can financially support us and help us along with your prayers. Thank you so much. God bless. Take care.